I consider myself rather well educated. I know mosquitoes are attracted to the color blue twice as much as any other color. I know the Loch Ness Monster is a hoax, and I know Bleach is a relatively middle-of-the-road shonen compared to its other comrades in the pantheon known as the Big Three. But knowing that is actually what surprised me about my opinion on Bleach, Thousand Year Blood War. Welcome back to Words of Paradise, and I'm your host, Leon Idle. Once again today, we will be taking a break from the news so that I can give you guys my thoughts, opinions, and full review of Season 1, Part 1 of the Bleach Thousand Year Blood War anime. Now, I have not read the manga, so if you in the comments below can also maybe not spoil for me, that would be great. Especially since retroactively, some of my opinions might change if new information comes to light in the subsequent parts. That being said, as it currently stands, here is my semi-spoiler review of Bleach Thousand Year Blood War. I say semi-spoiler because there are a lot of things I'm leaving out, not necessarily because I don't want to give spoilers, but just because a lot happens in one season, and I'm really only going to be focusing on the things that I think are worth mentioning, and also, if you haven't seen it and want to watch this review anyway, still give you something new and interesting without me covering every minute detail. With that being said, let's get on with the review. It opens with two nameless Soul Reapers, who I will affectionately refer to as Cannon and Fodder, entering a familiar city, with Cannon headstrongly ready to defend the place and Fodder wisely cowering, knowing that they're out of their depth. In true anime fashion, things go from fuck around to find out in about 20 seconds after they separate. Cannon is seemingly dead and Fodder is about to share the same fate, and that is when the show really starts. Ichigo, Orihime, Uryu, and my main man, Giga Chad of the clan Emo Hair, show up and begin to decimate the enemies that Fodder found himself surrounded by, while simultaneously asking the question, what's collateral damage? Saving Fodder, and by extension the day, or well, night in this case, right out the gate, fans get exactly what they were asking for. This animation is crisp, it's clean, even the moments of CGI usage are blended perfectly so it's not a distraction from the narrative or the characters. The small character redesigns also do look remarkable, and with the updated animation techniques, give the battle sequences a flow that they've never had before. But even after the battle, when we see Ichigo and Ko at his apartment, and the show stays visually gripping, the warm sunset colors are coming into the window, it gives the characters a soft glow, and it's honestly really a visual sight to behold. But this episode is not all about Ichigo. It cuts to the Soul Society so we can be shown the terror that will be the main antagonists, a group of Quincy's that with ease dispatch Yamamoto's bodyguard and friend Sasakibe, stating that in a matter of days they're going to be invading the Soul Society. Now, why they chose to warn them and also give them time to prepare is beyond me. It is not exactly the most strategic thing for an army to do, but bad guy pride gonna bad guy pride, I guess. The episode ends with Ichigo locked in a battle with a newcomer, and Yamamoto mourning his friend's death. It is a really great way to kick things off. I mean, it gets fans excited for Bleach's return after a decade, and it does it with a bang. So, while I figured it was important to give a quick synopsis of the first episode, from here I'll mostly just be covering the events of the series, as well as the things it does well, and things I hope to see improved on in Season 2. While some of these issues are likely also present in the manga, since these issues have to do with the writing, it doesn't alter the fact that they are problems and should be taken into consideration when doing a proper review. So Ichigo and everyone but Uryu head to Hueco Mundo to stop the Autumn cars. And if it sounded like I started having a stroke in multiple languages at once, that's because we get to our first real problem with the show. So, the manga kept going. There was no break. They went straight from the Aizen arc right into this. But there was a 10-year time gap in the creation of this anime. And unfortunately, you're kind of just expected to know certain things that have been established, despite the fact that they were established so long ago in real time, that there are going to be new viewers where this is their first introduction to Bleach as a whole, or even someone like me who has seen it, but it had been so long that my friend, a much bigger Bleach fan than me, had to keep catching me up and reminding me of certain things. So while the pacing of the show overall is fantastic, it probably couldn't have hurt to throw in flashbacks or explanations given the real life time gap for returning casuals and new fans alike. As is, it could feel like exposition dumps for previous lore that the viewer has no concept of. I mean, they talk about previous characters and events with such a casual nature that it makes you want to pause the show and then hop onto the Bleach wiki for a refresher. But that means ruining the excitement you've got inside of you because the pacing as is does work and is gratifying. In Waco Mundo, another battle kicks off because, well, it's shonen. It's easier to count the episodes that don't have battles in them. And this time with a Quincy and his garrison against Lady Halabella's elite warriors. And just like in the first episode, the action is top notch. I haven't talked about the blood in this yet, but let me tell you, there is more blood spewing and spatters in this show than in your typical Rob Zombie film, and I freaking love it. I won't lie, I was worried this show would suffer from massive censorship issues since it is technically being aired by Disney of all companies. And if you've watched my previous videos, you know exactly how I feel about the House of Mauschwitz. That said, the ladies three don't last in the battle too long, as the current episode's BBEG and Hitler cosplay reminds us it is okay to beat women as long as they're holding weapons. Then Ichigo shows up to save the day. It is rather formulaic shonen stuff, but fun nonetheless. Big bombastic attacks, heroes and villains talking shit while locked in combat, music that can pump you up enough to beat the first monster in Elden Ring without taking a hit of damage. If I'm being honest, I've actually found myself rather tired of shonen as I've grown older, opting for more slice of life or sci-fi or just story-driven slow burn anime. But there is something inherently edge-of-your-seat fun about seeing an anime from the past retain its shonen roots while looking and feeling more adult than ever before. At this point, the Quincy army does remember, hey, we're the bad guys, and decides they're going to attack the Soul Society ahead of schedule, and we get to see a lot of good men and women die. It's kind of like watching a 38-year-old at a metal concert decide, I can handle the pit. And much like those brazen yet foolish Disturbed fans having the illusion of truth stolen the next day by a bitch named Reality, the Soul Society realizes they're having something stolen as well. Their Bankai. One by one, captain after captain, their Bankai sapped away from them, leaving them vulnerable to this onslaught of white-clad, German-sounding assailants. Byakuya is the first to fall, after some intense imagery of Rukia going all George A. Romero. Dude, this man is exploding with so much blood, you'd think he was actually just a giant jugular vein using a transform person spell to take the shape of a Soul Reaper. Kenpachi seems to be having no problem though, as he is shown to have single-handedly taken down 3 members of this assault team. Seriously, the show does an amazing job of setting up and reminding you how powerful Kenpachi really is with this, since we've been seeing nothing but the other head captains barely fighting for their lives at this point. But this is actually another case of predictable yet awesome shonen tropes, because this only serves to show us how strong the real villain is. So, Head Captain Yamamoto joins the fight, and the tides of battle seem like they're going to turn. He arrives at his destination, the main antagonist, Yawak, holding a beaten and broken, nearly lifeless Kenpachi by the throat. All that blustering and feats of strength moments earlier, just for Kenpachi to be so easily trounced off-screen with Yawak not even breaking a sweat. Again, it's nothing we haven't seen before in shonen, but that doesn't make the prospect of fighting this guy seem any less dangerous for us as the viewer. That being said, Yamamoto and Yawak's battle is it's difficult to put into words. The fast-paced animation with blows that feel like they have true weight behind them somehow, even though it's just 2D drawings, combining that with flashback sequences giving exposition on how we got to this point, that's tricky to pull off. Shonen anime often fall into this trap of stopping the battle to explain things, which brings the pace to a halt, while giving the much-needed backstory on how things came to be this way. It's a lesson in give and take. Give the audience the explanations they need, but take away the excitement of an edge-of-your-seat battle. As much as I love Naruto, it's a lesson that it never really did learn too well. Thankfully, Bleach seemed to learn it. By intersplicing the past with the present, so it's still shot like one continuous battle with all the necessary information given, leading Head Captain Yamamoto to unveil his ultimate technique. I visually had some mixed feelings about this, because there really is an emphasis on CGI when he uses it, and it is not near as well blended as the hollows were in the first episode. But, considering the budget of this show, and how nearly perfect looking it is throughout the entire duration of the season, I actually think this may have been an intentional aesthetic choice. I think what they were trying to do was give us, the viewer, the same uncanny valley feeling that Yawak is experiencing at the hands of said technique. Now, if that's what the artists were trying to do, they hit the nail on the head. But I could also be giving the show too much credit, and this is just another case of anime not really knowing how to properly integrate CGI in every instance. But even if that isn't an issue, this next part is. So, we know how powerful Yamamoto is, and we've seen Yawak is on the edge of defeat. But by this point, we're only about 7 episodes in. We know the main bad guy won't be defeated here, which means there's only one of two things that can realistically happen. Either A, the battle's going to prematurely stop, or B, Yamamoto's going to lose. Well, in this instance, both kind of happen. It's done with a relatively lazy trope. It turns out the individual Yamamoto's been fighting the whole time is actually an imposter, and the real Yawak takes the Chrome Dome captain by surprise, dealing the finishing blow. Writing-wise, you could probably see this coming a mile away. Things were going far too well, far too early on in the show. Something tragic and world-shattering had to happen, and with Yamamoto being the center of attention, his death was the only outcome that made sense. Now, I'm not against main characters dying. I am, however, against it being done in such an easy-to-predict way if you're wanting to give your audience the emotional payoff and jaw-dropping factor of a major character death. To combine that rather underwhelming moment with the truth that it was really a stand-in for the main bad guy all along, it kind of felt more like the writer knew they wanted Yamamoto to die, but had written themselves into a corner with how to do it since he'd been made so strong, and this half-assed copy power was the best way to write himself out of said corner. Now, notice how it's been a while since I mentioned our main hero. It's because he's been absent. Yeah, trapped in a prison between worlds. But in the final hour, he breaks out and arrives just in time to fight the main bad guy himself. Now, also remember how I said earlier the only other option was to have the battle end early? Well, that's kind of what happens here. We all as the viewers know that Ichigo can't win this fight. It's too early, there's been next to no development of his character, no growth, no new moves learned, such as Shonen is wont to do. So that's exactly what we get again. Ichigo's defeated, but before he can die, Yawak and his goose-stepping cronies must depart. They've spent too long in the Soul Society and can't sustain themselves there. They're something. It's actually not really properly explained, so just go with it. Ichigo's blade's broken, but we're given foreshadowing that, wait for it, he too has Quincy blood. Now, unlike previous examples of foreshadowing, this one's actually done well. Again, I haven't read the manga, and it's not explicitly stated, so I turned to my friend to ask him if my assumption was correct, as it was only that, it was an assumption. After he confirmed my suspicions, the show does outright tell you near the end of the season. But that's how you do foreshadowing right. Plant the seed in the middle of the season, only have it verified at the end, to the point where throughout the duration, it lingers in the back of your gray matter, but doesn't distract you from what's going on in the forefront. So after that battle is over, we're introduced to a new cast of colorful characters, the most powerful of all Soul Reapers, Squad Zero. Now, you're probably thinking, why weren't they around during the invasion? Probably could have saved a whole lot of lives had they been there. And you would be correct, which I find dumb. They do say they're above this sort of matter and their job is to guard the king himself, which takes priority, and I get that. But if your whole army is dead, what's there to be king of? It seems like kind of a flimsy excuse. Again, this is a writing issue, probably present in the manga as well, but I do have to call it out. As the show goes on, flaws do start to appear in its otherwise perfect outside appearance. And much like the next issue I have, we find out Byakuya is still alive, in critical condition, but alive nonetheless. I call soul shit. He's dead. We saw him lose a grocery store's worth of milk gallons of blood, and from what my buddy told me, the author actually did intend to kill him, but then walked it back because it upset the audience. That said, after walking it back, the other half of the audience that were intrigued by this character death were now upset because of the walk back and the author's inability to stick to his guns. Now, I must say, as someone who did not read the manga, I am in that camp. The show goes out of its way to make you feel like he's dead and gives you plenty of moments to mourn and feel the impact. So for it to be walked back, yeah, it feels pretty cheap, I won't lie. So Ichigo and the wounded are taken to the Palace of the Soul King for special training and healing. And here's where my final issue with the show takes place. The comedy. Now, comedy in shonen is nothing new. In fact, comedy and action go together in shonen like peanut butter and banana. But the pacing of this comedy is off-putting. The comedy itself is fine. I laughed, I chuckled, like, the comedy itself is fine, but the pacing is off-putting. We have a small but effective bit in the first 2 episodes, and then we have absolutely nothing until, like, episode 8. And then from episode 8 through roughly 10 or 11, once again we get quite a bit of comedy. But then it's back to no comedy for the last 2 episodes. When you're watching this weekly, like I mostly was, save for the last 4 or so episodes I watched in one sitting, you probably don't notice it. But now that the full season's out and it can be binged, I won't be surprised if viewers find it as off-putting while watching as I found in hindsight. But in this miniature little training arc, we do get good bits of comedy as well as some awesome bits of lore and exposition. We find out about the healing properties of the sacred baths. We find out there's a certain character who can place souls into inanimate objects. We find out how Zanpakutos are created. And that's a big deal because that's Ichigo's final challenge. Because of his broken Zanpakuto, it can't be wielded again unless it's reforged. But that can't happen until, tell me if you've heard this one before, he finds himself. Now, granted, this is another trope, but here I don't mind it. It's only for the last 2 episodes of the show, and it is important for our main character to have some growth and development, and that's what these last 2 episodes are all about. Ichigo learning about his father and mother's past, how it ties into what's happening now. Granted, in an albeit convenient way, but that's neither here nor there. What it means for him and his bloodline. Upon learning the truth, he finally has the understanding and respect of his inner self, which isn't just symbolism in this anime. I freaking love that. There is literally a physical representation of his Zanpakuto whose trust he needs to gain. And with that, his blade's reforged, and it culminates in a final, beautiful, cinematic shot, giving the viewer a sense of catharsis, and it generates excitement for what's to come next. Rather than a cliffhanger ending, we get a resolution to one problem, while still remembering there's others on the horizon. All in all, much like any other piece of writing, Bleach Thousand Year Blood War is not without flaw. There's tonal inconsistencies here and there, tropes that often crop up in shonen that often aren't improved upon or done in an original way, times of predictability, but none of that takes you away from what this is. A return to form for a beloved franchise that has spent 10 years in the shadows of its famous brethren. While Dragon Ball, One Piece, and Naruto never left the zeitgeist, entertaining us with continuations and movies and video games and other media, Bleach was relegated to the past. Until now, Bleach came back, and it came back with a proclamation. The sword is me. The flaws it shares with countless other shonen anime, hell, countless other series, anime or not, action or not, they don't bog this anime down. No, Bleach is at its best now, better than it was 10 years ago, better than it was when it aired, better than it was when the freaking manga first hit the shelves, and I can only hope that it continues to stay on this path, making sure the seasons continue and that it doesn't become hollow. But that's what I have for my review of Bleach Thousand Year Blood War. If I had to give it a number, it comes in at 8 stolen bankais out of 10. But tell me, what did you think of it? In the comments below, let me know. Tell me if you've read the manga, but don't give spoilers. Or is there anything I got wrong? Again, with no spoilers. What are some other anime you'd like me to review? Let me know. Also, please subscribe because, frankly, I've been trying to grow this channel and it would mean the absolute world to me. And follow me on Twitter at BoltTheWord because this has been Words of Paradise.